Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, big praise for Joan Beringer following Summer League. Is there a chance he gets some rotation minutes this year as an 18-year-old rookie? It's all coming next. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I am the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. And today I want to start by talking about Joan Beringer, the Timberwolves' first round pick this year, the 17th pick, the 18-year-old Frenchman. There's been some really big praise that's come out post Summer League, and obviously we've praised him here on this show, and there's plenty to go around. But there's now some other kind of like I don't know, national praise, I guess you could call it, that's going around related to Joan Beringer. I want to talk about some quotes that an executive, a Timberwolves executive, gave Keith Smith from Spot Track, and then also the rookie survey on ESPN. Some pretty interesting stuff, and literally a Timberwolves executive saying that there's a possibility that Beringer ends up with rotation minutes this year. Pretty incredible stuff. So I want to dive into that a little bit. We'll talk a little Terrence Shannon Jr., then a bit of rotation stuff here to close out the show today. First, a big thank you off the top for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And a reminder, of course, you can also follow on X at Locked On T Wolves and also at Beecken with two B's, two E's, CKEN. All right. So we've talked extensively here on the show about Joan Beringer. Of course, just a couple of weeks ago, it was on the heels of his massive 6 block. I think it was like 12 rebound or 12.8 rebound, 7 rebound, 6 block debut. And of course, a bit quieter after that, some foul trouble in a couple of those games. But overall, an overwhelmingly positive and I would say impactful Las Vegas Summer League for the Timberwolves first round pick. And if you just looked at that first game, it was very clear that the sky's the limit for Beringer. Like it was obviously there's no polish on the offensive end, but just the instincts, the shot blocking ability on the defensive end of the floor, the instincts and effort on the glass, the way he, and I talked about this I think on yesterday's show too, but the way he defends on the perimeter, like all that stuff is very enticing. And it looks like to see that in a game situation against other NBA caliber athletes and talents is really impressive. And turns out everybody saw that, right? So what I want to there's a couple of different things that I want to focus in on. The first thing is actually just crazy. Timberwolves so this is an article by Keith Smith over at Spot Track, spottrack.com, which is the website that I use for contracts. Like this is the best website that has like multi-year breakdowns for teams, salary cap stuff, etc. That's always up to date. Keith Smith does a good job over there at anything salary cap related. He's a great follow on X if you don't already follow him. But he did a write-up following Summer League, an article for the West, an article for the East, and he's got multiple bullets for every team where he talked to coaches, executives, etc., and quoted them semi-anonymously. And this that he said, an anonymous Timberwolves front office executives, like this is from the front office, and these are exact quotes. Okay. So I want to mention, I'll read a couple of these, but the Beringer one is the one that I want to really focus in on. Like there's a quote, I'm not going to read it verbatim because it's a nothing quote about how losing to Alexander Walker was rough. You have to make tough choices. There's options for other guys, right? We know that. There's also an interesting this one's a little more interesting. I'm not going to focus a ton on it today, but he was asked about staying under the second apron again. This is a Minnesota front office executive. And the quote is, "It's not a mandate or anything. It's something we're conscious of, though. We want to be mindful of not putting too many burdens on us. We'll add salary if the right move is there, etc." So again, if basically they're not locked where they're at, and if they need to add ownership is essentially giving them the blessing to add, which is interesting. The most interesting quote, though, is the middle one listed by Keith Smith. I'm just going to read this verbatim and then I'll react. It says, "More on the team's young players. Quote, our vets will carry us, but they need support. That's going to come from the guys we've added over the last few years. A Wolves front office executive said, quote, Jalen is ready for a bigger role, meaning Jalen Clark. We love his defensive approach and he's improved on offense. Terrence Shannon Jr. got a little run in the playoffs and held up. He's ready for more. Rob Dillingham is going to get a shot to play a lot too. We have to figure out how to keep the minutes off Mike Conley better. And you saw here in Vegas that Joan Beringer is as competitive as they come. He's going to force his way into some minutes too. I think that's a fascinating quote because it's not on the record. It's not Chris Finch, kind of being encouraged to give. And Chris Finch doesn't really do that. I don't want to be unfair to Finch. He doesn't really give lip service like, oh yeah, this guy's great. We'll have to find minutes for him. He doesn't really do that, but that's not at all what this would even be. This is essentially an anonymous Timberwolves front office exec. Maybe it's Matt Lloyd. We saw him courtside on the NBA TV broadcast, ESPN broadcast, and we know Finch and Conley were there. This says front office executive. So it could be anybody in the Wolves front office. And the fact that this isn't a question that said, hey, tell us about Joan Beringer. This is a question about the team's young players overall. He lists Jalen Clark, TJ Shannon, Rob Dillingham, all as guys who can take pressure off of Mike Conley. Those are all guys we talked about extensively here at Locked On Wolves about backfilling the vacated Nickeil Alexander-Walker minutes, right? And that's on the heels of the Nickeil question. And then unprompted, other than just talk about the young players, he says, you saw that Joan Beringer is as competitive as they come. He's going to force his way into some minutes too. That is fascinating because the assumption is the guy's 18. He's played 1 year of pro basketball, has only played the game for not even 4 years. And Joan Beringer, he's not going to play minute. He's not going to take minutes from Julius, Randle, Rudy, Gobert, Reid, right? But I've been talking about in the show, hey, who's going to fill those vacated Luka Garza 10, 12 games a year minutes? Now, I will say on Tuesday's show, my summer league takeaways that I did, go back and listen to those. I did say, I said, look, I don't think Joan Beringer ever plays a non-garbage time minute this year. However, he at least gave the Timberwolves coaching staff and front office pause and showed that he could if he needed to in a pinch. I did say that. And I also kind of posed the question on Tuesday. I thought out loud to myself and to everybody. Does that mean does it impact the way Minnesota does or doesn't fill those final two roster spots and their last two-way spot? Could the Timberwolves not add a big because they saw enough from Joan Beringer and to a lesser extent Jesse Edwards where they say, all right, we're fine. We don't need to add another big. We don't need to add Precious Achiuwa or Chris Boucher or any of these other guys that are still out there. We can roll with the dudes we have. And in the 10 games a year that we need another big, it's either going to be Jesse Edwards or Joan Beringer. And we would rather use those two roster spots on a guard and a wing. Throw it out there, Malcolm Brogdon and Amari Bailey or, one of the other guys from the Summer League team, Tristan Newton. And maybe maybe that impacts what they actually ultimately decide to do as they fill out the roster because they have that level of trust to an extent in this 18-year-old. It certainly looks like that's a possibility based on this front office quote. Now, don't expect rotation minutes. There's not room for that. The Wolves didn't play a fourth big rotationally last year anyway. It's three bigs. They have Julius Randle, Reid, and Rudy Gobert. Maybe the best three-man big rotation in the league. Those are all guys who have won awards, end of season awards, a couple of all-stars, former sixth man of the year, a couple of guys who have been on all NBA teams, all NBA teams. You don't need a fourth big that plays regular minutes. So the Wolves could be looking at this thinking, all right, if say, God forbid, Nas or Rudy or Julius is out for an extended period of time. We saw last year that happened with both Rudy and Julius at different times. And Luka Garza sometimes played more minutes, sometimes didn't. Sometimes they just played smaller, and Jaden McDaniels played more minutes at the 4. So that's the other thing is it's not a like for like. Rudy, if Rudy gets hurt, you're not giving 30 minutes to Jesse Edwards or whatever. You fill that in tandem or not in tandem, I don't know. Yeah, I guess kind of in tandem. If you give some of those extra minutes to Nas and some of them to Jesse Edwards or Joan Beringer, that is also a reality. So because it's not hey, like for like plug and play if somebody's hurt, they could be all right, this Luka Garza role that's vacated, we could fill that between our two-way guy Jesse Edwards and our 18-year-old rookie and Joan Beringer. We could figure this out. I think it's fascinating that there was an executive that kind of semi went on the record as saying that, given like there shouldn't be any expectation or not that that's giving him expectations or pressure, but the fact that it's even a thought in their mind is super encouraging. It also shows, by the way, everything that he's shown behind the scenes. Like that's a huge part of Summer League. And I can't remember, I read that in this obvious, but it was either the Keith Smith piece or maybe it was the John Hollinger piece that I'll reference here in a little bit, about how Summer League is such a big piece of the puzzle for these teams to see guys in the facility, in a practice setting, how they interact with others in the locker room. You know, are these guys fits moving forward? And if Joan Beringer is locking in on concepts and understanding this stuff as somebody who has so little experience under their belt as a basketball player, period, not just as a professional, how encouraging that is. And it means the Wolves brass feels the same way and the coaching staff feels the same way. I want to talk about Joan Beringer's mention on ESPN2 and put a bow on this piece of the rotation conversation, although we'll get back to it a little bit later when we talk more rotation. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Gametime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize that you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Gametime makes it possible. Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest ticket price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB. By the way, our buddies over at Locked On MLB. It makes it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming game. And I mean, there's obviously tons. The Wolves. The Twins are back in town this weekend. Some big games upcoming, and they've got a win. Trade deadline upcoming. Go out to Target Field, see the Twins. You could definitely do that here. Also, it's almost football season. Get all that stuff on Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Okay, a little bit more on Joan Beringer here. There was another national mention of him. Okay, this is on ESPN's article that they put out. 2025 NBA draft. Execs debate rookie of the year, who to watch. So this is more of a draft reaction than it is a summer league reaction. However, it posted yesterday on Thursday. So this is post summer league. So undoubtedly this was probably conducted during summer league, at summer league, whatever. And like clearly summer league performance is going to factor into what some of these guys are saying. So Jeremy Wu at ESPN surveyed 20 anonymous NBA executives and scouts asking for their thoughts on the incoming rookie class for the season. Based on their evaluations and preliminary observations from the offseason, participants cast their votes on 5 questions. Okay, the first one is who's your NBA rookie of the year pick? Obviously, 17 of the votes were Cooper Flagg. Dylan Harper got 2 votes, by the way, which is maybe not surprising. He'd probably be second on my list. And then Trey Johnson got a vote with the Wizards. And then it says which rookie other than Flagg will prove to be the draft's best pick. I was a little surprised there wasn't a Joan Beringer mention here. VJ Edgecombe to the Sixers at number 3 got 10 votes, and Harper to the Spurs at number 2 got 6 votes. And then also receiving votes, Carter Bryant, Young Hansen, Trey Johnson, Neat Clifford, and Asa Newell. I don't know, of those, Neat Clifford and Asa Newell are 2 guys that I previewed as possible picks for Minnesota. I was a little surprised again that there wasn't somebody that said Beringer would have a shot at that. Now, I'll read the other 2 quick first. Which pick was the draft's biggest reach? Yegor Demon, who's somebody that we previewed here at number 8 to the Nets, got 7 votes, and Young Henson to the Blazers at 16 got 4 votes. Cedric Coward to the Grizzlies at 11 got 3, and then a bunch of guys got 1 vote. And then the final one's about next year's draft, which Darren Peterson, 12 votes for the first pick, and AJ Dabensa with BYU got 8 votes for the first pick. The one that has the Beringer mention, which rookie will be the biggest draft steal, which is interesting because, well, I guess it's the flip side of the biggest reach. So the biggest steal of the draft, number 1 was Carter Bryant to the Spurs at number 14. He got 5 votes. Joan Beringer was second, 4 of the 20 votes, the second most of anybody, as the biggest steal here. And I'll read what it says in the write-up. Here we go. There was also excitement around Beringer, another defensive-oriented prospect who played well in Las Vegas. The 18-year-old French center has been playing basketball competitively for only 4 years. We know this. He has demonstrated strong instincts as a shot blocker, lob catcher, played his way into the first round of the draft, had a shot at going to the lottery, blah, blah, blah. Then it says an Eastern Conference GM said Beringer could turn out to be a top 5 player in this draft. Upside is through the roof, and he doesn't even know how to play yet. He is also in a perfect situation where we can learn and grow from all of their bigs. 100%. Right in line with what that Timberwolves front office executive said in the Keith Smith article that we just talked about last segment. He doesn't know what he's doing yet, and the instincts are obviously really good. Again, defensively and on the glass, but also spacing-wise offensively, knowing what he can do, and also knowing what you can't do is more than half the battle offensively for a guy who's going to be, the fifth option if he's on the floor. He's not, anywhere near somebody who's going to have offensive opportunities drawn up for them. It's going to be reactive stuff. It's going to be knowing the spacing for lobs, knowing how hard to roll the basket, the pacing there, spacing the open floor, cutting from the corners from the dunker. All that stuff was really good from him. And I love the quote, upside is through the roof, 100%. We haven't seen offensive tools yet. So it's really hard to in terms of raw European players who are lanky and we don't know a lot about, he's not Giannis, right? Giannis at least could do more off the dribble and some of that stuff, but it's that sort of a situation. I feel like we know a little bit better. The Giannis tape was all super grainy. Giannis was 12 years ago or something when this happened. So I'm not saying he's Giannis, but it's similar in that sort of a whoa, this dude's going to be really good defensively right now. What could he do offensively? And that's right now, it seems like he's got the tools to have an impact on the defensive end of the floor today. And that's why I say everything I said in the first segment, everything I said on the show the other day, is that could he just play this role? Hey, shoot, we need somebody for 8 minutes tonight. We're not relying on you to do a thing offensively. Just do all the stuff I just listed, space correctly in the dunker and run the floor and all that stuff, catch lobs. And then defensively, just, be a monster like he was for much of Summer League and especially the first couple of games. Just really cool to see that much recognition from the Eastern Conference GM that was quoted here as well this early on. Everybody saw it in Vegas, and there's again, I go back to the fact that we're even having the conversation, that there's any chatter at all that hey, look, Beringer, we might have to find minutes for him. I mean, was that the exact quote from the Timberwolves executive was, he's going to force his way into some minutes. That's crazy. He's 18. Just really fascinating. And of course the Wolves could turn around tomorrow and sign, a Precious Achiuwa or somebody like that. I don't think they will, but it's possible. The point is they're not relying on him for minutes. He's not part of the rotation. He's a depth piece. It doesn't mean that he won't play. And that's the vibe that I think we're starting to get. All right. I want to close by mentioning a TJ Shannon call out by a national reporter, national analyst, we'll call him, and talk a little rotation, just kind of a high level, who's in, who's out, kind of reset here as we head toward the end of July. We'll do that here next to close out the show today. All right. So we talked a bunch of Beringer. I want to talk TJ Shannon. And he was obviously the star of Vegas for the Timberwolves. No doubt about that. And, the Beringer game 1 is maybe the most stirring individual game performance. There was a really good Rob Dillingham game in there. Game 4, I think, of which I guess would have been the last game he played in. But I don't want to, I want to spend another segment here talking TJ Shannon. John Hollinger, The Athletic, called out TJ Shannon in his column that was called, it was titled Cooper Flag, Johnny Furphy's Dunk, and Other 2025 NBA Summer League Standouts. And under Too Good for Summer League, he, of course, lists Kyle Filipowski of the Jazz. who of course was Summer League MVP. And then he mentions TJ Shannon from the Timberwolves. Hollinger says Shannon got in 3 summer games before the Wolves shut him down, scoring 68 points in 88 minutes and standing out athletically. Of note is how often he launched from 3, taking 26 of his 42 shot attempts from beyond the arc. If Shannon can become a reliable volume 3-point shooter, it's much easier to see him filling the wing minutes vacated in Minnesota by Nickeil Alexander-Walker's departure. All right. Where else have you heard TJ Shannon called a volume 3-point shooter? Here on this podcast, I've talked about frequently, TJ Shannon is not and this isn't breaking news, he's not a sharpshooter. That's not what TJ Shannon does. It's not what the Wolves are asking him to do. But he is a dynamic open floor player who can shoot threes at a decent clip at high volume. And last year, he only played in 32 games. He actually only attempted what was the total number of, he shot 31 threes in 32 games at 35.5%, which is kind of exactly into the regular season. It's kind of exactly what I would have expected from TJ Shannon. Go to his college numbers, and of course he played 3 years at Texas Tech and 2 years at Illinois. And he had 2 years at Tech where he had a 36% year and a 38% year. Those were both lower volume. First year at Illinois, he attempted 156 threes, which is almost twice as many as he ever attempted at Texas Tech. The playing time obviously went up as well, only 32%. But last year, or I should say his last season at Illinois, the last season in college, 36% on 213 threes, which was 6 a game, almost 6 a game. No, a little more than 6 a game, 36%. That's not sharpshooting rate. Like that's a college 36%, obviously shorter 3. 36% is like a shade below what league average is nowadays in the NBA, believe it or not. But that's fine if you're going to shoot it at that volume. And teams, like there's something about a volume 3-point shooter, like it's Julius Randle in the good years. That's what that is. You know, you shoot more threes, you're going to make more threes. And if you make it at a league average clip, you're not hurting your team. And I think there's also an additional positive effect it has on your offense because teams see you launch that many and they see you make enough that it's like you always got to know where that guy is. And you always got to know TJ Shannon's going to trail the play and knock down a 3. He's going to race down in transition and pull up and shoot a 3. He's going to sprint to the corner and catch and shoot a 3 in transition, whatever it is. You have to be aware of where TJ Shannon is at all times. And that's the impact that him shooting volume 3s at league average or better is going to have on this team, not to mention everything else he can do in transition. He's athletic enough to get to the rim. He showed a lot of passing chops, the ability to distribute in Summer League beyond, I think, what we expected. In a couple of those games, he had this 7-assist game. He had, so too many turnovers too, but by and large, it was encouraging. And again, the focus from Hollinger is on the 3-point accuracy and the athleticism that stood out. And I mentioned this yesterday, like dude's 25. Nobody else in Summer League is that old. He turns 25 next week, actually. So almost 25. So all that to say, really, really positive stuff from TJ Shannon. And really, like, even if it is the majority, like if it's not the full Nickeil minutes, his ability to put pressure on the defense in the open floor, like he's trying to dunk on someone in the open floor. And then in the half court, the decisiveness to quick catch and shoot, and defenses need to know where he is in the half court because of the range and the volume and the accuracy with which he shoots. But then also, he, like I said, he's decisive. And that's another thing that I thought was encouraging about Summer League is there wasn't a whole lot of like stand and wait. And we see that, obviously Ant's a very different player, but we see that a lot from Ant. We see it from some other young players a lot of times, or inexperienced players in the case of Terrence Shannon. But Shannon catches and goes. It's either catches and shoots, catches and drives and kicks. I would describe him almost as a slasher in the half court and just a demon in the full court in transition. And that's exactly what he showed in Vegas. So it was cool to see him shouted out there by John Hollinger. Rotation-wise, real quickly, when I talk about him filling the non-minutes, I spent a lot of time talking about this, so I don't want to belabor that point. But when you look at the Timberwolves roster, the only 3 guys they lost are Nickeil, so one of their top 8 guys, obviously, and then depth guys in Josh Mine and Luka Garza. The only addition they've made is Joan Beringer. Ingles was a free agent, came back. Zakarski's on a 2-way. Jesse Edwards is back on a two-way, so we don't know about Tristan Newton. It looks like Bones Highland isn't going to be back. So there's really no turnover outside of the Nah role. And the Nah role, unless they sign a Malcolm Brogdon or they're not going to sign Russell Westbrook, but like somebody that's out there that's like a rotation guard type guy, which at this point, I don't know. Like my guess is, and I said this the other day, I think they're waiting on some of those dominoes. The Westbrook domino is probably impacting the Brogdon domino, and some of these other guys that are finalizing. Like Chris Paul just signed, I think, over the weekend. Once a couple more of those guys signed, it's possible the Wolves are waiting on somebody's answer, and then they're going to move on. But all those two-way possibilities and guys from Summer League, the Amari Baileys and the Tristan Newtons and the Jamal Canes, like those guys could be in the conversation for a roster spot or the final two-way. But we're talking depth guys. Short of a Malcolm Brogdon or somebody like that Minnesota says, all right, we're going to bring them in and they're going to be the backup point guard. The point guard depth chart looks the same as it did last year, except for Nikhil ended up playing those backup point minutes as really a wing. It's Conley, it's Rob Dillingham, and that's it. And then you get into your, shooting guards that can play point guard. Dante DiVincenzo, Jalen Clark, I guess, outside of Ant. I mean, that's your backcourt depth chart. At the 3, you've got Jaden McDaniels, you've got Terrence Shannon Jr., and at the 4, you've got Julius Randle, Naz Reid. That's it. Joe Ingles backs up, I guess, both those spots, but really the 4, and he's not going to play rotation minutes, obviously. At this point, last year I thought he was going to. That didn't happen, or it started the year where they tried to have him play rotation minutes. It obviously didn't work out. No Josh Minott as like a backup to the backup third string 4. Bigs, it's just Rudy Gobert and Randle and Naz, who I just mentioned as power forwards. And then you're into Leonard Miller, Joan Beringer, and then a pair of two-way centers in Jesse Edwards and Rocco Zikarsky, who aren't going to play rotation minutes. But, I think there's a chance they treat Jesse Edwards like Luka Garza a couple of years ago and give him some opportunities. So Garza's out. Minott's out as deep depth pieces. And then Nikhil's gone, and they're going to backfill those minutes with combination of Rob and Clark and TJ Shannon. My point in saying all this is there hasn't been that much turnover. And Minnesota still has 2 standard roster spots available. I think people, they only have to sign one, and I think they will only sign one guy. But let's not lose sight of the fact they've got 2 roster spots and 1 two-way spot that have not been announced yet. So that's what we're keeping an eye on here. And again, we'll keep a finger on the pulse of how free agency kind of winds down as we move into next week. A reminder that throughout next week, we are still daily through the month of July. So we'll go Monday through Friday next week. The following week, we'll go to 3 shows a week for about 6 weeks or so as we get you ready for the start of training camp. That's what that'll take us up to. So lots to get to still next week. Lots of offseason stuff to still talk about. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, for your second listen, go check out the Locked On NBA podcast. There is absolutely no offseason over there. Our guys Doug, Matt, and Hayes do a great job keeping you up to date on everything offseason in the NBA, help you to be the most informed NBA fan possible. You can find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, this show is also part of that very same Locked On Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast. We'll catch you next time.